a Salvadorian immigrant himself, and a career-long social services practitioner. Ro is most recognized for his groundbreaking pop duo with his 9-year-old daughter. He wrote. Okay, so Ro, please share with us who our panelists are this evening.
Hi everybody, good evening.
Oh, and I should have said, welcome to Ro Moran.
Hi everybody, thank you so much for being here tonight. We really appreciate your time. So I want to welcome our two amazing panelists. First of all, we have Leslie Stephanie Molina. Leslie is a bilingual paralegal administrator at Neighbors Link. She recently received her master's from the University of Birmingham in the United Kingdom in migration, super diversity and policy. Her thesis focused on mixed status families in the United States and how current immigration policies and enforcement practices alongside constructed social factors impact them. Leslie is also the daughter of immigrant parents from Guatemala and El Salvador. And Heidi Cerneka? Cerneka. Is a Marino lay missionary and an attorney working with Las Americas detainee team. Prior to work to Las Americas, she spent over 20 years working as an advocate for the incarcerated women in Latin America. In Brazil, she worked in the trenches, visiting prisons every day, while also sitting on state and federal government councils as civil society representative of issues related to women and incarceration. She participated in human rights events regarding justice-involved women as well. She recently graduated from law school and was in Kenya for a year working with refugees through Jesuit Refugee Services in a program that trained incarcerated Kenyan women to be paralegals. Now she's an attorney in Las Americas as part of the detained detention team, which means that she works with asylum seekers in El Paso, in Juarez. Every day she is a new adventure in learning and managing the effects of cruel policies that some administrations, the current administration, is perpetrating against those exercising the right to ask for asylum. Thank you both for being here. So, firstly, that was a tough watch. I had watched bits and pieces of the movie, and just watching it to the end was a tearjerker for me, and it was difficult because I am Salvadorian, and thinking that there might be one or two little things in my life that kept me from being Johan. And the fortune that I may have had, and etc. So it was a tough watch. How did you guys feel while watching the movie?
Hi. Well, unfortunately, it is a reality for many of the migrants. My parents did cross the border before they came to the United States. And I don't believe they went through the desert. I think I remember my mother telling me that she's claustrophobic, but she remembers going through this tunnel. And I don't know exactly, I think they came through California. But they went through this tunnel and they showed up on the other side before she was detained. And I don't know too much about my father's story. He when he first came, he kind of doesn't like telling his story a little too much. So, but unfortunately, it is a story that many people face, and it's a reality that everyone has to face. Yeah.
I have to say, my first reaction really is indignation and anger, because I feel like that his blood and the thousands of other people is on U.S. hands, because if he could come to a port of entry and ask to come in, he wouldn't have died, and the reason he can't do that is because we shut the doors. So a mixed reaction of sadness and anger, but certainly a motivation to keep working to change that, because in part because it's the right thing to do, and in part because I feel like the people that are against policies that would make it fairer and safe for him want us to quit. So I feel like we can't quit, because then we would be giving in.
All right, let's go to some questions. Does anybody have a question about the film? Anything for Leslie or Heidi? Not all at once now.
I have a question just about the making of the film. Was this done in real time? And if so, how did the cinematographer know to be there? Or is it a reenactment?
From what I've gathered from the film, it's a reenactment, but actually the actor, Gael Garcia Bernal, actually took the journey himself. Did everything, he was acting like he was Johann, but at the same time, he was actually doing the journey himself.
But the family and all, were these the real people? Or these
Yes,
Those are the real people.
Yes.
And the body that was found, those initial scenes were real.
Yeah.
That was him really. So there was a team actually actively investigating as they came up across this body.
So they got the family to reenact the funeral and everything?
Oh no, that was the real deal.
Yes.
Really that part.
Right, it was actually a documentary. The only thing that was, I don't want to say staged, was that they, what was the gentleman's name?
Gael Garcia.
Right, was that he went and he attempted to live the journey that Johann experienced so that we could understand the mindset of the people and the experience of the people that brought Johann to the end of his life.
Just a small question. I was wondering who paid to ship the body back to.
I think one is the government, or maybe
Go ahead.
from what I understand, just from past experience, like I think the family pays for it. Like I had a little cousin that passed away, and the family shipped the body back to El Salvador. But that may be different for situations where bodies are found at the border.
Yeah, I mean, it might be different. I just heard of a case, and it was like $10,000 to ship the body back. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I know some countries do things like they pay for it, and then you pay them back.
How do you guys think that the new policy where Trump is requiring that migrants stay in Mexico, how would that affect what we're seeing here? How do you think that's affecting how people cross and where they cross and such?
I think a lot of people probably aren't even aware of that. A lot of people probably don't understand what it means, so I think people are still making the journey and trying to cross. We see in El Paso, we cross over because there's like 15,000 people in Juarez alone, in the sister city of El Paso on the Mexico side. There's like 15,000 people who can't come into the U.S. and ask for asylum, even though they have a right to ask for asylum. They're being held in Mexico. And so people are still coming. And I think if we talk about why is it that people are fleeing countries to come here, that hasn't changed. So that I think hope and resilience are amazing things. And so people are still coming with the hope that they'll be able to get asylum or they'll be able to come in. One of the other things that kind of goes more to your question is the main bridge between El Paso and Juarez. There's a bridge that you cross, and in the middle of the bridge you literally cross from Mexico into the U.S. And the way asylum works is as soon as you have your big toe, one little part of you on U.S. soil, you can ask for asylum. You have to be in the U.S., but you can ask for asylum. And so people would come to the bridge and they'd say, I'm afraid to go home, I'm asking for asylum. So what the U.S. government has done is they've put soldiers in the middle of the bridge who ask you for an ID. They're not Customs and Border Protection, they're not customs agents, they're simply making sure that before you put that big toe across the line, you have permission to enter this country so that you can't legally cross the bridge and ask for asylum. And because of that, it's like saying, we shut the door for people to not come across the desert. We shut the door of the way that they could ask for asylum the way the law is written. And so if you're desperate for an opportunity, in his case, desperate for an opportunity because things are so bad for his family, or desperate because you're really fleeing violence, you can no longer come in what we would consider the legal way, and therefore you're pushed into things like crossing the desert.
The film was unbelievable. Totally, that's not going to be out of my head for a long time. I have a daughter who was adopted from China. It was just so powerful. It's just amazing, and I wonder, maybe there's not one answer, but I wonder what people would conjecture in terms of why would they say no to immigrants when we've had immigrants from the beginning. And I wonder just what's behind all that.
Trying to write down your question. I think the anti-immigrant rhetoric has been going, it's not new. It's been going on for decades, it's been going on for centuries within, it's always a war between the global north and the global south, regardless if we're in North America or in Europe. It's not new. And I think what it is, it's basically just creating a difference between two people, or two groups of people, right? How can I put this? It's just it's constructions of illegality that they want to make. It's forms of a way for a country to form their own national identity and to separate themselves from others, and wanting to outcast other people for maybe religion, maybe for the color of the skin, maybe for their language and things like that. But I think it's definitely not new. I think what we're seeing now is just that in the period of time that we're in now, it's just the old discourses are just morphed to fit in with the new migration patterns that are happening now and everything that's happening.
I think there's a fear, and I don't think it's real. I think it's a created fear, just like sometimes people talk about this created crisis of immigration. I think there's a fear that's been created that somebody's going to take my job or take my land or take anything, and we've bought that fear, and so then all of a sudden we get protective. And I think people really feel that fear. I was going to say it's legitimate. I think people really feel that, and that makes people back up and retrench, and try to shut the door. I just heard somebody this week also say that there's approximately Guatemala earns, let's say, approximately $200 and something million a year in the coffee that they raise and export. Like there's $200 and something million worth of coffee income a year. And the person that did it, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but basically what he was saying was the money projected to be put on the wall is almost equivalent to that. And so what he was saying was, we could give everybody in Guatemala 100% raise on their income instead of building, and as the man at the end said, an inanimate wall, And if we did that, we would drastically reduce the number of people that are coming because they can't survive on the money they make in their home country.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment because I agree it was really a hard documentary to watch because it resonates so much, difference in where you were born. I mean, as a fellow immigrant, to feel like something my parents did made a difference, that we can get on a plane and get here and live a life and become an American as opposed to someone else from some part else in South America, because I am from South America, but one of the shithole countries. But something 40 years ago made that difference, that we had a different route. And the comment about the billions of dollars spent on the wall just really resonates in thinking about what we value. We seem to value...
May I have your attention, please? The library will be closing in a half hour. Please note that the computers will be shutting down in about 15 minutes. Please save all your work.
we seem to value security and walls so much more than people, and I find that really sad and warped.
Thank you for saying that.
I'd just like to add a little bit, if I could, because I'm thinking about this film, and it makes me feel helpless, powerless to do something about it. And I think that's what the film can help with. You know, I think we can see it as a story that needs to be told to many more people, so they see that these are people, and every effort is being made to dehumanize. And that, we know, is the beginning of a terrible narrative for this country. So how do we change the narrative? This is one wonderful way to change that narrative. How can this film become a story that's told over and over again to change that narrative?
And I think our job is to rewrite the ending, right? We can't rewrite the ending for him, but how do we rewrite the ending?
I think that's something interesting that's come up, and that's something that's crossed my mind. Basically, as people living in Austin and New York, where we're not next to the border, almost out of sight, out of mind for a lot of people, right? It's just not something that you think about because you don't see it, maybe. So what should be a role that we could take to support this and to support people, prevent deaths, etc.? What should be a role?
Just to answer your question, well, to add to what you're saying, I think being able to continue the story, or to like, I think it's difficult, but it's not hard to accomplish. I think everything that's going on, like this whole dehumanization of immigrants, it's been in history books for centuries. I think it's systematic, and for that to change, we would have to take a systematic approach in changing policies and changing political opinions and changing a whole bunch of things. It's a wider web of interconnected relationships, I think. But for people to start changing those kind of things, I think being able maybe to volunteer with certain organizations that assist migrants in the asylum process, or just talking to people to hear their stories, if you want to like spread it that way. I know with my research for my master's, I did it on mixed status families, and a part of taking an autoethnographic approach, telling my story and adding it to current and academic work that's been published. I interviewed different families in Orange County who were going through the same thing that we had. I interviewed DACA recipients, I interviewed agricultural migrants who are undocumented, and told their story that way, and tried to interconnect their stories into, you know, what's happening now. But yeah, I would say like volunteering and trying to see, like what Ro was saying, the stories that we don't see, that we're not at the border and we don't see what's happening, and we don't know the stories of the people fleeing the countries because of gang violence, because of police violence, or any, you know, things like that.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think, I like to say cultivate indignation. You know, I mean, sad is okay, but we have to move from that to somewhere. See the human face, what you both said, what we are saying. He was a father, right, who wanted something more for his kids. What parent doesn't, you know? So when we pull it out of, I mean, we need to be political about this, but when we pull it out of the political realm and say, what's the story here? You know, I mean, I met a father from Guatemala who said, you know, I had a job. My wife had a job. We had a home. We had 4 sons. And when my oldest son turned 14, there was a knock at the door, and the gang said, it's time for him to join us. And he said, we dropped everything and we left. And I thought, like, what parent wouldn't do that? You know? And unfortunately, under our asylum laws, that doesn't qualify for asylum, because gang violence will not win you asylum. But, I mean, what else would he do? And so I think when we put that human face on it, it makes a difference. I think volunteering, supporting people and organizations. There's some really great organizations. When we get somebody at the border who's pursuing their asylum claim but gets to do that with family, so they might come into El Paso and then travel to Newark to be with a family member while they're following the asylum claim, there's an organization called Miles for Migrants that people donate frequent flyer miles to, and we called them, and within 2 days, I have a plane ticket to Newark for my client. You know, so there's all sorts of ways people can help. He gets a $10,000 bond, which means the government says, we don't trust you, but if you pay $10,000, we'll let you out of detention. And if you go to all your hearings, you get that back. Did that guy have $10,000? No. So there's people that donate money to bond funds to help pay so that people can get out. They still have to go through their whole asylum claim. You know, and I have to say, in this day and age, just from working in Texas especially, another thing I recommend is learn Spanish. Learn Spanish, really. It's another step, I think, in the right direction.
Gracias.
Sitting in this room, I think that we all feel pretty much the same way. But I have to tell you, and I mean, we're an awesome, wonderful community that I'm so grateful to be in. But I don't know if you guys are on social media. There's a lot of hate out there that I see every minute. I don't engage because I did once with immigration, and it got very ugly. I'm an immigrant. My parents came here. My dad had a sister who lived here, and he had to go through a rigorous process. But I know, when my father's gone, I know that if he was in a desperate situation and he had to leave somewhere because his children were in danger, he would have done it whatever way he had to. That's me. But I have people I went to church with growing up. I have cousins. And the hate that comes out of these people's mouths is horrible. And I mean, I'm getting emotional. I don't even want to speak, but I have to get it off my chest because when I had gone to an immigration protest or a march in Melquisco, and I put up a beautiful sign of someone who was proud that he was an immigrant, he was getting his education, he was going to be a doctor, and I got the most horrific, as long as it's legal, hateful comments. And then I said, I can't do this anymore because I think we see the outpouring of love here, and I see a lot of hate out there, and it's very sad. So
I appreciate you sharing that. I think you're right. I'm not trying to live in La La Land, but I think you're right. I mean, I bet there's not one person in this room that doesn't have a family member who strongly disagrees with some of our stands on this. When we can, and I don't think I'm good at this, and I haven't figured it out, but I think when we can, we have to engage in conversation with people that steps out of party politics and says, don't we all agree in security and safety and dignity and justice? Can we all agree in health and education? Can we all agree? And then from there, how do we get there without it being politics? I don't think we always can, and I know that in my mind, I say that, but I know that I'll sit down and have that conversation the whole time thinking, yes, but I'm right. So I'm not there yet, but I do think that that's where we have to get if we want to change the world and in our country. I think there are times when we can't go there. I think there are times when it is damaging to us, and we need to find groups of outpouring of love and be in a safe place. And I think that is perfectly okay and good, you know. So I think each one of us has to figure that out. But I do think somehow we all have to be able to engage beyond staying in our corners because we won't get anywhere.
I just wanted to say that I appreciate for you sharing that because I mean, there are people out in our community, in our country, that do share this hatred, and unfortunately, we can try our best to explain or change their opinions, and it won't work. And we can, I mean, for some people it will. It's just like a fact of just sharing the right information, but for others, I think it's going to be hard. And I think that's where we come in when we, you know, we share our love for each other right here.
I just want to say, I think we have to somehow get back in touch with something like way deep inside ourselves that says, this is just wrong, and I'm not going to let go of that. You know, I may not come to agreement with that person or those people, but I have to hold on to something that I believe so firmly that I'm not going to be pushed somewhere else, even by somebody's hate, you know.
One thing that I wonder though when it comes to what you both mentioned is if I live somewhere in rural America, I've lost my job, I have one place that I regularly turn to for news. I've also suffered trauma of some sort, perhaps trauma that may have been inflicted by someone who looks different than me. And I'm also living in poverty, and I'm also struggling to make ends meet. And you have somebody else that's coming here. I think it may make sense for someone to feel insulted and everything. So how should, from our age, when we can engage in this conversation, how should that conversation look like? Because there's a difference between saying, no, immigrants don't pay taxes or anything, between saying, no, there's a humanity to this. It's about being humane. So how do we hold that conversation?
I think one is facts, but we know that facts don't always work. One is having facts and human stories. I honestly think, and again, I'm still trying to figure out how to do this, but I think we have to start by listening. Like I have to be able to, me too, pause and listen to that story and figure out where you're coming from. You, that fictional person from rural America. And really hear why you're in that space, you know, so that I can say, I get that you're afraid, that you're, you know, feel that your job is threatened, that, and understand that, instead of walking in to tell you why you're wrong, you know. And again, that's really hard, but I think dialogue is about us, like kind of in restorative justice work, we like is backing up and saying, where do I want to get at the end of this conversation? You know, if I want to get to pointing to you that I'm right and you're wrong, have at it. If I want to try to have this conversation get somewhere else, what do I need to do to get there? And when I can, I know we can't all the time, but when I can ask myself that question, I think I get farther.
I totally agree with you, Heidi. I think that's the missing part of what's happening. Like, we just are not listening to each other, and that's what needs to happen. I think also a little bit of kindness always goes a long way. Even if it's the smallest act, I feel like it just helps.
I think we have time for one last question. Okay, Diana, okay. Quick questions though, okay, good.
Mine was more a comment. I mean, I think it's a whole paradigm shift that we need. I'm a child of immigrants too. I mean, I've seen ship records from my mother's family where you had to prove, who you were going to live with and who was going to support you. And what I hear going on, and I hear it from my own cousins who, not all of them, but in rural, who, are saying, but what about all of our young people who are living in the streets, who don't have proper health care, who don't have money? I mean, we know someone who the idea of food stamps is $3 a week. That's a joke. So what you hear is that so many of our own people are suffering. Why would we take care of people from another country? And I think the issue is that we need this whole paradigm shift, and we need to vote for the right person so that we do take care of our own people And then...
May I have your attention, please? The library will be closing in 10 minutes. If you have any items you wish to check out, please bring them to the circulation desk now. The library will be open tomorrow from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Saying that we need to show that we're taking care of our own people, and that weakens the argument some, and so then you can take care of everyone. And it's always been in our history that the newest immigrant is the one who's picked on and so on. So the answer is voting. The answer is really voting.
Running for office.
We have one more question, and then we'll turn it over to the panelists for final comment.
Somebody in the documentary mentioned about America exporting grain and undercutting the local markets in Central America, so that's obviously economic injustice. Can you talk to why there is apparently so much violence? Why is there such violence in Central America, that people are fleeing violence as well as economic situations?
Take it away.
Yes.
Long story. Can't tell in 9 minutes. But it's important to note. One thing that made me uncomfortable about this film is that they talked about the poverty, the abject poverty that people were facing, but they didn't really go into the crime and the lives that they're leading over there. The fact that they can't board a bus because they had to pay a toll to someone, or else the whole bus gets torched. The fact that, in some areas, children are being completely, kidnapped in order to join gangs. The fact that once was agriculture, in, let's say, El Salvador, a country of 21,000 kilometers squared, now there's nowhere to plant a tree. And then this violence is escalated, and this, I'm like I said, I'm from El Salvador. I was born seeing weapons all over the place. Everybody, guns on my high school friends, and it was all over the place. And it's crime ridden, and it's crime ridden because we had a civil war that was fed because of the Cold War, because of what was going on between here and Soviet Union, and just communism versus capitalism, etc. And it was a war where no one was going to win. And my country, in 10 years, faced 85,000 deaths, and it was because of the political system. And because of that, once that money stopped coming in for weapons and for arms and aid, etc., you had all these soldiers and all these guerrilla war fighters just waiting and saying, what do I do now? All I know is how to fight. So I'm going to go rob, because since I know how to fight, maybe I can rob, and maybe I can kill. And I think that's where that violence comes from. And if we use the word migrant so often, but these are refugees, I think. And it's important to note that and to make a note of that.
Well, thank you for bringing that piece of the story to the top here for us. And I'm sorry that we're going to have to complete our conversation in just a moment. Before I turn it over to our panelists to give us their final thoughts, I want to thank all of you for joining us. And you've seen these screens scrolling by. Please do come back and join us on Thursday, September 21st, when we'll talk about our own problem with gun violence in this country with 91%. And also, you may have noticed a bunch of names scrolling by on the screen. Those are friends of the series. Some of you are here in this room today. Those are folks who give a donation to the series, and if you're interested in doing that, the suggested donation is $20. There's a beautifully decorated box with butterflies on it in the hallway out there, and little handmade envelopes if you want to give a donation, and then you can have your name up in lights, and everybody can see what a generous, thoughtful person you are. Okay, so with that, please, final words from our wonderful panelists.
I just wanted to respond to the comment about, taking care of our own people, and I think that the thing is, my goal is always to call it, let's level up, not level down, right? And we have the resources to do that and receive all of the refugees and immigrants, So I don't think it has to be an either or. This country has the resources to do both.
Thank you.
And for me, I'm just going to go back to the historical. I mean, this has been going on for years, for centuries, and I think the best method for us to be more informed is to read on the histories of El Salvador and Honduras and Guatemala. Like, read what was going on with the Civil War and how, like, who sponsored it and things like that. I think it's just inform yourself, I think, and then we'll be able to put the pieces together as to what's happening now.
Thank you both so much for being here and for sharing your stories. We really appreciate it, and I think that this conversation really is very important to us in New York and just the country in general at the moment. So thank you guys and everybody that shared their experience. Thank you.